Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on a session online with a webinar regarding DebiCheck, successes and lessons learned. We are so used to having very regular interaction and connections, communications and so forth through to our customers. A very big part of the NewPay business is actually built on that interaction and engagement with our customers. We naturally prefer having a face-to-face discussion and engagement, but the situations are what they are. And here we find ourselves having another online virtual session with all of you, which is terrible for me, by the way. I really thrive on getting that engagement from the audience and getting the feedback and so on from you guys. There is a panel available in which you can pose questions. There was a short little manual that was sent out to everyone, where to download the software, how to get it onto your PC so that you can actually get into it. GoToWebinar is a new platform, well, for us to use, not in industry, but relatively for us. We've previously done this thing via Teams. GoTo has some other advantages, which is why we're using this platform. So we do apologize if you were caught off guard with downloading some software and having to install it and getting ready and so forth. There are still people logging on at the moment, which is why I am doing my introduction a little bit as well. So yes, we obviously prefer to, as I said, engage with you guys directly, but that not being possible, chosen to at least engage with you in some or the other way. We would appreciate. I'm getting a lot of echo on my side. I'm sorry. Let's see if turning down my volume maybe. So what we in terms of housekeeping rules and so forth, I hope that you all know where your bathrooms are. If you need to and get out to that again. The questions that you post will be received on our side and will be given through to me electronically on a separate screen. So we will handle all of those questions as they come up. I would really appreciate if you would log those things as they come in. As you think of them, please log them, and we will most certainly then try and get to them at the end of the session and go through a list of all of the questions. If there's something that is maybe a burning point that needs to be presented, then we will do so immediately. On the line with me on this side, I've got Brendan van der Mesht. I believe that most of you guys know him already as well. He's been with us for a number of years, also furniture, part of the greater team here for forever, one of our right-hand men, and someone that we really rely on. He's also an absolute boffin and fundi when it comes to all things terminal, specifically, not exclusively. There's a whole big bunch of things where he also excels and stands out. I do have another panelist with me as well, which is Morne Groeneweg. Morne is probably inside of NewPay the most knowledgeable person in terms of DebiCheck. He's studied these rules up, down, left, right, and center, all over the place, and he's also the person that drives all of our enhancements, innovations, improvements, and so forth on the system. So yes, he's our go-to man when it comes to DebiCheck, when it comes to rules, interpretation thereof, and how we actually run all of these things. So just to dive into the actual presentation quickly, a quick look at the agenda. I'm going to touch briefly on the numbers, just numbers of processing and so forth that have taken place. I know that there's a burning question in a lot of people's minds, which is fees. So I will be looking at fees as well, just diving a little bit into that and try and give you some tips on how to improve the fees for you, how you can improve the fees for you. We'll be briefly touching on migrations. It's starting to become a hot topic now, that together with RMS, are definitely the next two items that's top of mind at the moment. Then we will be looking at some of the terminal and connection options and stuff that is available to you guys. I'm going to hand over that section to Brendan. He will handle that for us, being the guru. It's only right that he should be handling the stuff that he's the absolute champion at. Then I'm briefly going to touch on understanding reporting, because I still get it very regularly that there is some little issues and nuances and where people just don't understand one or two things, two critical things that I want to point out in terms of the reporting to you guys. And then just the overall managing the system for your benefit. The consumer and user is yourself, obviously, as merchants of the system, users of the system. So consumer and user adoptions of the platform, and how that has gone off so far for all of us. All right. So if we then dive into the numbers immediately and we start looking at a few items here, understand top left corner there, if you look at growth of initiation. So this was during the lockdown stages that we had, and all numbers are compared to March 2020. So in March, we had some transactions processing from select few customers. It wasn't great, big, massive volumes, but there were a few thousand transactions processing. And then obviously lockdown came, and we launched with a big initiative around TT1 transactions. And naturally, we brought TT1 because everyone was in lockdown. Your shops were closed and you couldn't get to the systems. We had a 1,000% growth of initiations. That's just mandates being initiated, no terminal, all of it remotely via systems, via software, being initiated into the system and processed. The next month, on top of that, we had a further 1,500% growth. And yeah, that's a telling stat. You know, when you get into that kind of volume, you can really see that there's great adoption, maybe because people had no other choice and they were forced into it a little bit. But I think that in the long run, and I'll explain later why I'm saying this, but in the long run, that might have been a small little blessing in disguise for us and for you ultimately. But there are some risks in that as well, which we'll identify and look at and speak briefly to. We saw a slight little dip in those initiations come in the month of June. Simply that was when lockdown restrictions were raised to a degree. Some trading started happening and so forth. And then we see the spike back up again, not because of enhanced lockdown procedures again, but rather we believe because of better user adoption, so merchant adoption of the platform, taking it on and saying, yes, we really want to do that. Below that, if you look at the bottom left, TT1 transactions versus TT3, it speaks for itself. You can see where the volumes are. Clearly, everything sitting inside of TT1 on the platform. If we then move over to the top right, the growth of initiations in 2021, and I think it's no one needs to guess where the big cutoff of the ADO system was, right? We can all see the count and the massive spike that we've got in transactions in May, on the 1st of May, and during the month of May, for transactions being registered and processed through the system. What's interesting is that you'll see a slight little drop off on volumes there. Although there was still significant growth, I mean 40,000%, that's phenomenal. It's a massive growth on volumes. But you do see a slight little reduction. We believe we understand why, and I'll explain some of that to you in some of these slides to come. You will note in the bottom right there how the swing from TT1 went over to TT3 and how the production went over. We were expecting a little bit more on the TT3 and the TT1 to actually drop off more and further. It's interesting that it did not. It just more or less stayed at that level. Yes, the TT1s are coming down. Yes, the TT3s are climbing a bit. There's reasons for that as well. And we still believe that TT3 is definitely a more superior service, and for very specific reason that we believe that, which I'll also get to in a minute or so. So just looking a little bit deeper into some of these things, just the top two slides and the bottom ones repeat of the previous ones. But what's important to understand is that during this stage, you know, NewPay has already initiated more than 2.9 million mandates. So those are contracts that's been initiated through the system to be processed on the back of this platform. That's in a 3-month period looking at May, June, July. It's not counting any other periods. Then if we look at future installments that have been created to the system, there's more than 10 million installments that's sitting there waiting to be processed by banks. Then if we go to the graph on the top right, then we go and look at TT1 no responses. And this becomes important for the remainder of my text that we've got here. If we look at the no responses, you know, during the stages last year where TT1 was the predominant system, we're sitting initially at 33%. Now, I must just clarify that no responses here means consumers are not responding to the actual mandate request. So a request is sent to them on their phone to do an authentication of a transaction. They are not doing that authentication. They're not pushing it through to the next stage. They're not responding back to this thing. On those instances, we will actually receive back a NRSP, response, no response. And that then has some further additional things that you can then do with that transaction when we look at, for instance, RMS, which we'll talk about in a second. So 33% dropping down to 11%. So there's quite a big understanding, or a better understanding, if I can put it that way, amongst consumers, but 11% is still significant for people not to understand what they need to do it. And we believe that there's a lot of consumer education required to reduce that thing. If we look on the right-hand side and we see that thing has dropped down to 4%, that's fantastic. However, if you go and compare it to the volumes, the growth of the initiations that I've given you there, you know, 4% on those kinds of volumes is significantly high. It is exorbitant. So not a fantastic position to be in, and we really believe that the industry, the consumers specifically, needs education. I did mention that in my notes at the bottom as well. And yes, the systems from the bank are still in development. They are still maturing. They are not at a stage where we can say, you know, like Ada, we trust this thing. It will process every single morning. We know that we will have our results of transactional processing back every single morning at 6 o'clock. It will be in, and we can bank on that, and you can bank on that. And I think all of us knows that in the last month, especially maybe 3 weeks, there's been a big challenge in terms of actually getting those reports to show on the transactional reporting in systems and so forth. I promise you that we are leaving absolutely no stone unturned. We are driving this thing to get that reporting faster and more efficient to you. There's such a massive spin-off that comes out of a late response. You know, when you get a transaction not being reported on, it has impact on settlements to you. That has impact on you not being able to fund a new card profile, and that has impact on you not being able to process transactions. And at the end of the day, that has impact on us as well, because, well, if you're not processing transactions, where is our right to existence, right? So I can promise you that we are driving every single angle to get this thing more mature. We are trying to aid the banks in developing, enhancing, improving their systems to also get us those responses a lot faster. I'm being told that very shortly there will be some implementations that will significantly improve this. I have seen last week a marked improvement in terms of responses. This week, Monday, responses or results of transactional processing were in fast. They were in early. Yesterday they were late again. Today they were nice and early again. So all thumbs up on that one. But it does remain an issue. So just important again to distinguish and separate no responses, which I've listed there. For instance, in the June 21 period, industry reported 57,000 responses that were outstanding. So those are consumers not responding to mandate initiations. That is not actual transactions not being reported on. That is two separate items. In terms of the systems maturity, the item that we are pushing very hard on is systems transactions not being reported on early enough at the moment. These things are coming in in drips and drabs throughout the day. We get more and more results coming in on transactions that were processed. We refer to collection files. So the collection files being responded to. There is a massive, big additional knock-on. You know, when we do these settlements out to you guys for transactions that were reported on as success in the mornings, we do that very, very early, and we've built a very enhanced and very solid pay-away platform. Thankfully, we've always had NADO, we've always had MPS. So in those systems, we were always used to doing the settlements. So we understand how to do settlements, and we've been doing that well for many, many years. We've just now increased the pot. But what we are forced with, the delay in reporting to now do, is not just do one settlement in a day out to you guys. We are doing multiple windows of settlement because we're trying to get your cash flow into your accounts as fast as possible for everyone. Because we understand if you don't have money, well, then we will not be doing business. So very important to get that money out to you. There's a significant impact on cost to us. These transactions do not come free when we pay them away to you guys. There is a cost associated to us. So it's not nice. We don't want to be sitting in this kind of a position for multiple reasons. And we assure you that we are in the same boat as you, with you, to try and do everything in our power to get the reporting sooner, faster, and better to all of you. Then, sorry, I'm just going to open up my questions on the other screen here for myself. So then, obviously, we've spoken about it. I've spoken about it briefly. The swing over to TT3 now. The nice thing about TT3 still remains that you've got a pre-authenticated transaction. So because you're doing your mandate with your card and PIN before the time, the transaction will be pre-authenticated, and you do not need to wait for a response. So consumer response has become something of the past in a TT3 transaction. Your data is also clean. We get a lot of transactions that are being reported on to us where the details of the account number were captured incorrectly, or an amount was added, an additional 0 or a 1 or a 3 should have been pressed in the distance. All sorts of little things. So clean data, very, very important, and TT3 really, really helps with that. It really is still a much better way to get transactions in. So if we look at the actual TT1 no responses graph on the top right there, TT3 is skewing that stat down to 4% simply because you have a clean process and the data is pre-authenticated. You do not need to wait for the response coming in. So yes, that improves it, which is then concerning even more probably on the TT1 side, that we still get those things, and concerning because of the associated fees that goes with that. And fees, we know, also is a very hot topic. It's something that everyone wants to discuss and want to understand better. So I will be diving into that, and I will be going straight into that as a discussion point. Let's do that now. So you know, in the ADO environment, you all know that transactions were built on success only. The average success rate of an ADO transaction of our book in general, always the average success rate sat at 86%. We are not including resubmissions. Resubmissions are regarded as bad debt. We're talking about the clean book, the first time presentments of transactions. That was the average book. Some of you have a much better success rate than that, or had a much better success rate than that. In the DebiCheck environment, our success rate's gone up. We're sitting on a 91% success rate. That's fantastic, especially if you consider that the average transaction value in ADO for the past 12 months of its existence was sitting at 1,270 Rand. And I can tell you, for the first 3 months of DebiCheck being full-blown in full swing without ADO as an influence, without NADO as an influence, that average transaction value has gone up to 1,570 Rand. So we believe that we understand why this is, and I'll touch on that, and I'm gonna get to that shortly. If we then look at the ADO costs that's on the system and what the ADO system costs you, if you process the total book of 300,000 Rand at an average success rate of 86%, you only paid for your successes, right? Then on 2.2%, that 261 would have cost you 5,742 Rand. If you look at DebiCheck now, you're paying in DebiCheck also for your failures. You're paying for your total production that you're sending up, success and failure combined. However, the rate has been reduced down to 1.9%. Now, if I do a calculation on the 300,000 Rand as a total cost, then your cost only comes out to 5,700 Rand. So this is in fact lower than what your ADO cost is. So it is critically important to understand that you can actually drive a reduced bill on this platform simply by looking at your success rate. So if you get this 91% success rate to actually improve by better screening of customers, and looking at credit worthiness and making sure that you tick all the right boxes. Understand that if you eventually have a 300,000 Rand book with a 300,000 Rand success value, then you're not paying 2.2% like an ADO, you will only pay 1.9% on that success. So this is how you actually do that. It's very important that you actually go and look at your own success rate and see where that equilibrium is, where you need to shift over and where it's going to start costing you more or less if you drive these things. A further point to understand is that failures are now being billed by the banks between each other and therefore onto us and onto you. And that is why it is now being billed on total production. So it's not something that NUPA went and sat and said, okay, we want to do it this way. In the previous environment, we were in a position where we were only being billed initially for successes. Later on, they added some billing for failures, but it was small. It was not a significant value. In the DebiCheck environment, that's quite different. The billing is significant on failures, and when you start running and you include tracking and all sorts of things, which we do for you, right? We bundle and give you a bundle that includes your tracking fees and all of that inside of your 1.9%. Then these things unfortunately start becoming expensive, and if we can't afford to pay these things, then obviously we can't afford to process your transactions for you anymore, and we won't be here. So naturally, we try and find ways to assist you to improve your successes and work with you, and that is why the consultants are there. There's an entire big team of people that look after this thing and that are there to assist you to analyze, to look at the book and so forth. It is also very important that if you are receiving constant failures on a customer, to maybe rather remove those failures out of your book, because then you're not presenting on that in total production, and by doing so, you're improving your success rate. So there's a bigger requirement on you to manage your book in various ways, not just one or two. So I mentioned on the previous slide that we believe we understand where this reduction on this second growth of initiations in 2021, the reduction is coming from, and it's directly related to, we believe, this growth in the average transaction value going up by 300 Rand. You know, you all know that if you process a transaction below 500 Rand, there's a minimum fee for that. So the 1.9% is effective for transactions above 500 Rand. Below 500 Rand, there's a fixed fee. So that percentage can actually go up significantly. And I think that you, our users, the merchants, you guys have started buying into that concept, you know, where consumers typically come in to have small value repayments paid back, whether it be for a top-up loan or a small piece of furniture that they're buying, or a little policy that they're processing with very low values, etc. The key is now to try and push those values up to above 500 Rand, because when you're processing more than 500 Rand, you're going over to ad valorem percentage, the 1.9%, and thereby you're not paying the minimum very high value transaction fees. So very important to drive those values up to get it above 500 Rand. It's something that you really need to look at. Rejections is a further thing. You know, when people come in and they make mistakes, when there's a mandate initiation and it's then rejected by a consumer, there's fees for that. This is not a fee that previously existed. You know, when you uploaded an ADO transaction or an ADO transaction, those transactions just went up into the pot, and if they failed, well, then, you know, they didn't actually get created. So there was no harm in that. However, the structure does not look like that in DebiCheck. In DebiCheck, when there is a rejection from the consumer, so they receive the request to authenticate the transaction, and they physically go and reject it and say, no, I will not process this transaction, there's a fee, and that fee is not cheap. It's not something that you want to be looking at on a monthly basis. So again, we believe that consumer education is going to play a very, very big role in that, together with your onboarding processes with your customer, making sure that you've got very good credit-worthy people sitting there and actually doing solid transactions, you know, providing a book that's a lot better. We've certainly seen that there's been a lot of retrenchments. That's been the feedback from industry as well. A lot of retrenchments, and on the back of retrenchments, less people taking loans. The spin-off on that is that we've also heard that yes, there are less people. However, the people there are more creditworthy. They are better lenders. So that could also be an attribute to why the average installment value has actually increased. These people are earning better salaries, they're more creditworthy, therefore they qualify for more money and they can repay better. So yes, you need to be strict on it. Yes, you need to look at these things. Yes, you need to make sure that you follow all the processes, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's for us to go and look for it and find it and then actually do it. Naturally, the no responses, as I've mentioned before, in a pre-authenticated transaction, which is TT3 by a terminal, will always have the best success rate for an authenticated transaction to be concluded. And those no responses, where the consumers are not actually responding to a transaction to authenticate it, are eliminated by and large by having a TT3 transaction process versus a TT1. By that, I'm not saying that TT1 has no space and place. I think that there's a significant place, and it's a great way for you guys to actually diversify and get other systems in. Now, if I think about our Delta solutions that we've got, if I think about web loans where you can do online loans and credit provision, if I think about companies in the retail industry that also have e-commerce type of platforms where people can go and buy, you can initiate these types of transactions and you can get them to repay their furniture, etc. on these platforms without seeing them. Then obviously something that we are not very happy about is tracking interchange that was increased between the banks. We don't understand this. It's not a new system that was built. It's something that's always existed, tracking. It's always been a concept. It's not like they had to go and redevelop. They didn't have cost to put it out there. But you know, when life deals you a few lemons, you have to make some lemonade. So it is up to us to make sure that we manage that as best as we possibly can. And therefore, the last point here, which is date selection, which is absolutely critical. You know, when you're sitting in the system and you're doing date selections, you need to get these dates right. Remember that if you go into very, very long periods of tracking, then you will be paying a higher rate for the additional tracking, extended tracking. Our customers have free tracking included, as you know, the first 3 days. However, if you start selecting and running into 10 days by default or 7 days by default, then you will always be paying that higher tracking fee on the end of that, which is never a good thing. Okay, so enough about fees. And I thank you. I see that some questions are coming in. They are being posted to me, and we will handle the questions when we are done with the session. But please continue to send in those questions. We'd like to answer them for you. Moving over to migration. So migration is naturally where you get into the process of moving your ADO and NADO transactions that have been created before the 1st of May into a system with DebiCheck, so that you can continue to process those very long extended terms of transactions. So obviously, when to migrate is very, very important. You need to be done and dusted, finished and clear by 31 October. people, if you are not finished by that time, there is no way that we can extend it. I actually had a customer yesterday, I won't mention names, but I had a question yesterday from a customer that phoned me and said, you know, I haven't uploaded my NATO transactions yet for the month. Can you please help me to do it? So, no, you need to upload DebiCheck transactions. Oh yeah, that's right. But can't you just get them to switch on the NATO for me, please? Just for one day, just for me, so I can just quickly upload mine. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. We don't make these rules. We have to abide by the rules of the national payment system. But yes, we still get that. When I eventually said, I'm really sorry, man, but I cannot. It's not possible for me to do this. I was asked, but can we then maybe just ask Reserve Bank to switch off the requirement of an ID number when we upload a DebiCheck transaction, because they don't have IDs for the transactions for their customers. Unfortunately, also not possible. So very important, understand your transactions and understand how they work. When you do a migration, you need to have all of the fields correct. All of these things need to work. So I believe that migration might be a bit of a challenge, and some people might still need to get to grips with it. But we are starting to run out of time. We're not quite there yet. But next month, certainly, if you've not started with your migrations by next month, please put some urgency onto it, diarize it, put it into your scheduler, choose 3 or 4 days to understand this process. We too had to learn from this, to be very honest and frank with you. You know, when we initially launched this thing, there are so many frequencies that are available, for instance, inside of ADO and NATO, you know, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, last day of month, and so forth. So there are only so many frequencies for payday. When you go to DebiCheck, you've got a massive myriad of additional frequencies that are now available that you need to choose from and that you should be choosing from to get these transactions in. So to go and map those things and say, so if it's this thing, then interpret it like this and move it over to that. That took us some time, and we apologize for some delays that were there. If you've experienced some of them, we believe that we are comfortable to continue working with these things and that we can continue to do all of your migrations. We've had a few people working with us, and some people also assisting us by doing a lot of test transactions. And if you are online, I also thank you from my side that you did assist us and for helping us to identify those bottlenecks and where we can get it in. The other item to remember around migration is that although the specification says that 2 days is what's required to get the responses back, so you do a migration, it's not automatically migrated. You need to now wait for the bank to actually send back a confirmation. Yes, we have migrated this transaction. I asked the guys on this side the other day, can you please supply me with a list of all of the failure codes that our customers might see when they do migrations? I tell you what, there's hundreds of these responses that came back. I got absolutely flooded. But yes, the challenge is that even though the specification says 2 days is what is required for a bank to send you back those responses, our experience is we get these things up to 5 days after the time. We still get, and these are business days, we get these responses up to 5 days later only from the banks confirming that a migration has been deployed and implemented and actually set to life. So please don't get caught. There's some time delays in getting the stuff in. Understand how the system works. It's not just a matter of, as you can see on the screenshots here, you know, we try and make it easy for you guys. So on the left, this is how you do it. You select DebiCheck migrations, you select your date ranges and so forth, just like you do with normal transaction maintenance. This is on your ADO or your NATO screen. You go and then select your transactions, and you then migrate them over in the normal transaction maintenance processes. Again, the consultants, the account managers, they can guide you through this. They can do some extensive training on you. And then on your reporting screens, you need to then do the reporting where you actually go and select, I want to see my migrated transactions as a default, so that I can see what has actually been migrated and so forth. So migration reporting, very important. Guys, please, it is critically important. Do not get caught. Make sure that you've got enough time and that you can actually get the stuff in on time. Then moving over to registered mandate service, or RMS, as it's known. Your account manager can opt you in for the service if you want to make use of the services on our systems. They opt you in, and then you're able to again go into your maintenance of transactions, and you're able to go and select your registered mandate service selection to make those changes. You can only do it when you've got a status on a transaction of NSRP. No response that was received on that side. So please, when you get that back, those are the transactions that you can migrate on, or rather register a mandate on for a transaction. You still need all of the original fields for the DebiCheck transaction, so you still need the ID number when you're originating it on that side. Again, the confirmation in the spec is supposed to be 2 days. We again experiencing up to 5 days for these things to come in. It is a bit of a process. We don't quite understand why the Reserve Bank went and created an RMS solution, to be honest. You know, the whole DebiCheck platform, you all know this, but yes, the platform was created because there was lots of debit order abuse from both consumer side as well as from users or merchants, rogue users they were referred to and are still being referred to in the industry. So when this system was launched, it was to get every single transaction listed as an authenticated transaction. Yet a registered mandate service allows you to say, so when I do not get a response back from the consumer, they have not gone and authenticated that transaction. No response from the consumer, not a rejection, and no response from the consumer. Then in those cases, you can just hit the register button and the transaction will still process against their account, even though they did not authenticate it. I think personally, we would have been better just having a little bit more of NATO for a short while. But that is not where we're heading. So the big picture is where we are going with this thing. Eventually, we have to end in authenticated transactions. It is important to understand that on a RMS transaction, the normal NATO dispute rules apply. So within 40 days, you know the drill. Everything that was valid on a NATO transaction is still valid here. It is also important to understand that although an RMS transaction is processed together with a DebiCheck pot, it is in the early morning. However, an authenticated transaction via TT1, 2, or 3, it doesn't matter which one, will be processed first in the early morning, and then these RMS transactions will be processed second in the early morning. Okay, so yes, that is where these things are done. Then moving over to terminals, I'm going to hand over to Brendan to discuss the terminals and components on the terminals with you guys. So Brendan, over to you.
Thanks, Vaughan. Morning, everybody. So I'd like to discuss some of the devices that we offer. On TT3, I will be touching on a bit of TT1 as well. So in our desktop range, we've got devices that well, Verifone devices and Bluebird devices. Within our desktop range, we've got Magic X4 terminals, which is a Verifone device. Now, a Magic X4 device, you can connect via connected solutions cable to your PC. It is your connectivity used on the Magic X4 device is either your own internet within your branch, or we supply you with a huge connect pad, and it has got a integrated slip printer where a slip prints out, and the consumer signs a copy, and they keep a copy, and you keep a copy. Then in our newer desktop range, we've got the Bluebird CT280s, again, can be connected via connected solution to your PC. Connectivity again is internet and huge connect, and then again it's got a slip printer. Now we've got another Verifone device. It looks like an oversized pin pad. It's called the Magic R4 device. This device can only be integrated via our terminal cloud control platform. It uses either connectivity via your own internet, or we can connect a huge connect pad to it. This device does not have a slip printer. Now, if you would like to use the Magic R4 because you want to save some costs on printing slips, you would need to be integrated to an admin system, and the admin system will have to be able to actually print your slip for you. Then moving over to our mobile devices. Again, our older device, it's the Verifone Magic M4 device. This device is unfortunately only a 2G device and a single SIM device. And then it can be integrated via our cloud control terminal cloud control connection to your PC to your webphone. The newer devices we've got are the Bluebird MT280. Now MT stands for mobile terminal. We do have 2G devices, and we have now started deploying a 3G device that has got a dual SIM capability. Now the dual SIM, we use MTN and Vodacom. We do have some Telkom SIM cards that we do use. And what will happen with a dual SIM device is that it will pick up the strongest signal in the specific area. Once that signal drops to a certain percentage, it will then move over to the other network that we have put into the terminal. We can also say which is the stronger network in your area. So if you say to us, if a technician comes out and installs the terminal or replaces the terminal, and you tell the technician that MTN is stronger, we can make MTN the predominant SIM, and then the fall over back to Vodacom. This terminal, the MT280, can be integrated via terminal cloud connection to your PC, and both the Magic M4 and the Bluebird MT280 do have a integrated slip printer. Now, moving over to one of our smaller sort of devices that works via our NewPay Go. Now, NewPay Go can be downloaded from your app store. It's an app where you can go and do point of sale transactions, as well as register DebiCheck mandates. You can register DebiCheck mandate via TT3, and you can register a DebiCheck mandate via TT1. I'll get into the NewPay Go a little more of the features on the NewPay Go in a minute. Now you're going to ask yourself, what device do we use within NewPay Go? Now we've got a little device called the Spire device. Now this Spire device connects to your cell phone via Bluetooth. You then go onto your cell phone, open up the NewPay Go, register the DebiCheck, the TT3 DebiCheck mandate. The cell phone then talks to the Spire device via Bluetooth. You then swipe the card or insert the card and enter the consumer then enters their own PIN. You will then receive an SMS or an email slip. There is two options. So either you type in the consumer's email address, or you type in the consumer's cell number, and they will receive an SMS. On the DebiCheck side, NewPay Go, like I said, you can register a TT3 mandate as well as a TT1 mandate. You don't need a terminal. You can register a mandate or TT1 mandate using the NewPay Go app. There's also some very cool features on the NewPay Go app. You can go view your reporting. You can do a point of sale transaction. You obviously need a point of sale merchant number from NewPay. You can do some maintenance on transactions, and it's really user friendly or on the go type of application that you can use. Now, in order for you to be able to use the NewPay Go app, your account manager will have to allocate rights to you. So if you are interested, please contact your account manager, and they will be able to help you with the NewPay Go app. And if you're really wanting to register TT3 mandates via the NuPay Go app and the Spire device, your account manager can arrange that for you as well. The future devices that we are wanting to get into market pretty soon, it's an Android device. We're looking at the Eurovo i9100. It's currently in certification. Now, certification is, we have to do certification for all our devices due to PCI. It does take a bit of time as we have to run a lot of tests through to the bank. The bank needs to make sure that our transactions are secure via that device, and it takes anything between 3 to 4 months to certify a device. The Eurovo device is, like I said, is an Android device. It's a 4G device, as well as a Wi-Fi. You can connect to your own Wi-Fi to get connectivity. So we don't need to put in a SIM card. We can connect the device straight to your own internet or your Wi-Fi connection. It's also a dual SIM device. So again, we can put 2 SIM cards in that device. And it's also got an integrated slip printer. And that's me, Vyaj.
Thank you, Brendan, for that. I'm back on again and people can see. So yes, that's just a quick rundown on terminals and what's spotting and where we're going with this thing. There's a little bit more information for some future items and so on, but maybe we'll get to that. Let's just see how our timing runs out here. So moving over to our next section here is just understanding reporting. I'm going to speed up a bit because we are running a little bit behind time and schedule. In terms of transactional reporting and mandate reports, please people, it is very important. This is something that I've seen that people make a mistake on. When drawing mandates, mandate is typically something which is taking place in the future. So it's a contract that is going to be debited against the transaction. Yes, you've got historic information. You can see mandates that have processed, but your real key that you want to focus on is actually your stuff for the future. In terms of transaction reports is where you will see your successes, your failures, and that kind of thing. And what is then critically important is this response date grouping criteria right at the bottom of that selection. So that thing by default at the moment says the create date or action date, please drop that down and open to response date. In fact, I think I'll just ask the guys on this side to change the default for us as well. The response date is definitely the one that you should be drawing on, because the success receives a response when. So if you've got an action date and you select transactions for today, you will not see the transactions of yesterday that received the success in tracking today, if that makes sense. So you want to use response date, that's when the transactions. So you want to see today what were your responses. It could include transactions from any previous 10 days of tracking, right? If you've selected response date. If you select the action date, it will only be for the transaction that you presented for collection today. So very important to please use that component over there. Then furthermore, in terms of reporting, this is one that's definitely in terms of the settlements and all of the multiple settlements that we're doing out to accounts, it does become a bit of a hassle. So when you go into your reporting, you've got a settlement report that you can go and draw. And what's very, very important is this section here identified by the arrows, the very first component, the invoice payment ID. If you look at the blown up section over there behind the /, you will see the section in red indicates your date. So that's the date on which it was settled to you. The next component in green would identify the time that the settlement was made from us to you on your account on that specific date. So very important, please, to go and check those times. You'll see the first transaction on that list that we're showing there was done at 11:21 in the morning. The next transaction was done at 06:18. So you can also download this list and then sort it by that column so that you get all the 06:18s together and all the 11:21s together so that you can see where they are. Now, obviously, 11:21 and 06:18 is not necessarily the fixed windows. The second window that we do is whenever we receive more responses in terms of collections that have been reported on as success, and then those settlements are made out to you guys in batch to get through to the system. Then the final slide that I really have to work on before we get to questions is just managing and understanding the system for your benefit. I think that I've touched on a lot of these things already, but what is absolutely critical to understand is we've got a change management process that we have to go through, all of us and you. This thing changed, and there's no way for us to go back. We have to work with what we've got. Legislation will not allow us to go back. So how do we do that? Well, we have to drive our staff to do the training and the understanding of the system for themselves as well as for the customers, because that will lead to better uploads, better mandates, better authentications, and better processing ultimately. It is very important to understand everything about the contract. So where to find your dispute reports on your reporting systems, looking at how slips print out these days without contract value. So you know that in ADO your slip printed out and it said, this is your installment value, there's so many installments, and this is your contract value. But now we're just giving you an installment value, and then there's a maximum amount. So this is different. And the guy's saying, but why is this thing now? I said, what's this maximum amount? This is not what I'm authorizing. I want something. Don't like. It's important. Understand these things. Explain it to your customers. Educate them about the process. How does this thing work? That's the only way that we're going to get buy-in, is if we do the education on everyone else. So us to you, you to your customers. And that is how we will improve the success rates to drop down the pricing of the overall system to everyone. So please, very, very important. Manual versus integrated transactions, I've got as a list here, because if you are doing a transaction manually, not via an integrated Delta system as an example, but you are processing this thing separately, then there's some links that are obviously missing, and you cannot pull in these transactions. It does not automatically receipt back to the system, and so forth. So your reporting can lag, and there can be some challenges in the processing for you. What further complicates this thing is that you need to ensure that your values on a manual transaction versus your contracts match 100%. And I cannot stress this enough. It's absolutely critical. At the bottom, I'm also going to touch on DOA. So I'll pass on that for now, just to get to it in a few seconds. Timelines in the reporting system. So when we launched this system, the reports that came to us, reporting that came to us on successes, failures, and so forth, we had a window at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then again at 6 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock in the morning, and then 11 or 8 o'clock at night was the next. So that was problematic, and over time this has improved. We are now, as of this week, we are on an hourly reporting window from the bank, so we're receiving responses from 2 a.m. in the morning all the way through to 11 o'clock, whatever, tonight, or 8 o'clock tonight. We're receiving responses from them, and we keep on posting more and more and more responses. So with that, obviously, we've requested also that we bring about a small little change for you guys. It's a function that you can use where you are going to be able to upload transactions or draw reporting on uploaded and processed transactions by time slots, so from and to time slots as well, just to aid and assist you. It will help with the reporting on normal successes, but also going back to the settlement reports, it will also help you on the settlements to identify when money was received on your side. We've had to do multiple settlements. I've spoken about that. I'm not going to elaborate on that too much further. And then the emphasis, again, I want to just bring back to you, pre-screening of your clients, reducing your bad debt will aid and assist you in driving down your costs at the end of the day. We have to go and focus it, you know. And I know of some businesses, when I started in this industry, some merchants actually said to me when they were extending credit that they were actually budgeting for 4% of bad debt every month. We can't think like that. We have to go and say, no, how do we budget for zero bad loss, zero losses in the system, and then do that properly. In the Delta systems, you will also know that we had date pickers in the system. When you did a contract, you had your calendar and you could go and select every date of a transaction, and then that sent it up to NewPay to process the transactions on those specific dates. But understand what the system actually did behind that is it sent us up the default date for your customer, let's say the 25th. And then it said, once we've registered the 25th, and let's say it's a term loan for 6 months, then after that, it did transaction maintenance to move those dates to the selections that you've made. Understand that in DebiCheck, you change the amount, you change the date, your transaction is reversible, disputable, and it will be taken back if the consumer questions it with his bank. So we've switched off that transaction maintenance component inside of our Delta system, specifically to cater for that, so that we are not messing around with your dates that are being processed. So very important, we've left the date picker there so that you can see when the paydays fall. So if you go to July, for instance, July the 25th was a Sunday. So you probably would have chosen maybe the 24th to try and get the authentication for the 24th for your consumers to process the transaction on, to push that into the system. So yes, again, I'm re-emphasizing, please, education of your consumers, very, very important. Identifying your abbreviated short name, the ABSN, that app name is absolutely critical. We get it every single day. We had a consumer that actually sent us a message last night and swore at us and said, "You took my money. Where is it?" People, please, if they don't understand who's debiting them, then we get those kinds of calls. 45% of our calls that comes into our call center is from consumers, which we call deduction queries. It's consumers asking us who's debiting my account. Very, very important, because these things will lead to suspension of mandates. It will lead to disputes on transactions. It's very critically important. The other component where a consumer can still also then naturally go and dispute or reverse a transaction other than the date or the amount is on fraud. And with talking to fraud, I'm getting to the very, very critical component at the bottom. People, please, it is absolutely, absolutely important. You need to avoid debit order abuse suspension. This is something that is not done by us. It is driven by PASA. They look at very high failure rates. They look at dispute rates. And when those things come in, they start asking us, supply us with mandates. And if we don't have mandates from the consumers, then the banks start questioning and they say, we want this stuff, please. So yeah, very, very important. Please make sure that you've got a mandate for every single transaction. At this stage, we know that we need a paper mandate. When the banks come to us and ask for a mandate, we know that we're allowed to upload a transaction with electronic mandate, voice mandate, and that kind of thing. You guys are allowed to do that. However, when you want to refute or block that dispute from happening on a transaction, the bank still says to us, where's the signed mandate? Because that voice on that recording could be any person. We don't know if it was actually Joseph that did that recording. We don't know. I have asked for clarification because in my mind, you know, we've got an authentication of the transaction which is happening from the bank to their account holder, their customer. They are doing that authentication. Therefore, I feel it's a bit harsh. In fact, I sent off a clarification request last night to PASA to request them to get clarity for us across all banks, because we have seen that all banks are not handling it equally. I've seen a question related to this in the questions that came up already as well. So, folks, yes, please avoid debit order suspensions. That is very important, and that's simply by doing your homework, you will get there. I'm going to move over straight into questions immediately and just ask Brendan and Mornay to also unmute themselves and stand by so that we can run through this. So the questions that I've got so far, I will go through them and then just pick who we're going to get to answer these questions for you guys. So the first question we've got is, in transaction uploads, how do I specify the employer code when adding a debit order online? So, Mornay, are you there? Can you maybe handle this one for us, please? Sorry, I'm not seeing Mornay coming in at the moment. Maybe he's having a bit of a hassle or a battle just to get himself unmuted there. So in the interim, there is a way, yes, when you upload a transaction together with the parameters that you send up, there is a parameter for the employer code that you can send up, and you can still drive all of that. So it's an entry field that you need to add into the system. Your account manager will certainly be able to guide you through the process to show them how that specifically works. He's just walked into my office, so clearly he's got a bit of a voice problem on that side. Okay. Then maybe Morna come in and said, yeah, I mean, if you speak, the guys will still hear you. If I need you to handle something for us, please. So then, is there an option other than signing a mandate as a customer is physically not present? So I think this is the point that I touched on very last, where I'm seeking clarification on. At this stage, you're allowed to upload a transaction without a mandate signed in writing by pen. However, when it comes to actually blocking that dispute, that's where the challenge lies. So that is the thing that we really want to get right, and want to get clarification on. We believe there's an authentication, therefore there should not be any issue unless there's a claim of actual fraud, with a case being opened up against someone for committing fraud. So there should be a police case that handles with that. So the next question I've got is, with delayed responses, and I'm assuming that we're talking about reports here on successes, are we sure that the banks are collecting from the accounts early morning, as with the previous ADO and NADO rules? Monet, do you want to handle that one for us?
Yeah, sure. So morning, everybody. So obviously we do have different scenarios, and as Vaughan mentioned, we did have some scenarios during the week and last week on late responses. We did confirm with the banks that they did process the transactions, but like I mentioned, we have different scenarios. If you have certain cases, please speak to your account manager, and we will handle case by case. But at this point, we can confirm that transactions are being processed early morning.
Yeah, so I'd like to add to that. You know, we, myself, Morna, a bunch of other people on our side, we're part of a WhatsApp chat group, which belongs to PASA, in fact, where they run things. We don't participate. We're there as viewers, read recipients on this reporting structure. But between the banks, there's communication going on every single morning to say, have you processed, and are your responses sent yet? And I can confirm to you that the banks they're being hammered on by PASA, specifically on reporting their transactions that have been processed. There have been very isolated instances over the past 4 months or so where transactions might have been processed, like, I don't know, an hour late or something against selected accounts here and there. However, PASA is driving this thing, and they are pushing everything to get processed a lot faster, sooner, and earlier every single morning. But yes, in terms of the early morning window, it does go to the early morning window, and that's why we're receiving the first file already in the morning at 2 a.m. every single morning. There is a request at the moment. It's a document from PASA that has been circulated out to all of the banks. The banks have accepted it. And in this document, they are specifying a service level agreement between all banks to say that transactions have to be reported by 5 a.m. every morning. That is what they have to strive for, to get their reports in and finalized. That was the SLA that was in place on ADO and NADO. So reporting on it by 5 a.m. becomes a critical component. The banks have all accepted it and said, yes, we will build our systems to cater for that and to get to that. That doesn't mean that they can flip a switch and they're there immediately, but they are all driving towards that. That was actually published last week, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Yes, right.
Yes, last week. So yes, went out to market. So yes, certainly early morning debits are taking place. Is there a way to export the PDF of transaction reports and have it firstly show our clients' ID numbers and then be able to have them as an ordered list in order of ID numbers? So I'm understanding sort by ID number in this Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yes.
Yes. So you would download the reports. On your reporting, you can download the report, you can put it into an Excel format, and then you can sort by that specific column. So there is a way to do that, yes. Again, your account manager can certainly help you and show you exactly how to do that. Then I've got a statement more than anything else, which is that 10 days of tracking is a problem, specifically in December. And is it possible to increase this to 30 days? I would love that. Unfortunately, we don't write these rules, and certainly not a rule that we wrote to go and limit the tracking to just 10 days. It's not something that we wanted. It is something that was forced to us and onto us by the specific organizations such as PASA and the banks, the interbank group. So unfortunately, we don't see this thing changing. 10 days is what we've got. Pay date management is the only solution that we've got in this instance. We have to go and look at pay date management and solutions on that. We have a standard format for our mandate report. Is it possible to include an ID number of a customer bank name, and the account number? Can I hand that over to you, Martijn? Should I repeat? So there's a standard format for a mandate report, and that mandate report is, they are asking, is it possible to include an ID number of that customer and then the customer bank name? So I think it's in the selection criteria, right? So if you go to the selection criteria on the reporting, there's a table that you can open up and you can change your defaults. You can go and select what defaults you want to see and then save it. So again, something that you can handle together with your account manager. They can most certainly show you exactly how to get to all of that, yes. So if a transaction is in tracking, does all banks continue to trawl the clients? It's a word I haven't heard in a long, long time, Philip. It's great to see that you've been with us so long. Thank you. Because trawling is a term that comes from Nubank Classic. So we really appreciate that you've been a loyal customer for so very, very long with us. Thank you for that. But yes, so do banks continue to track against the account, or is it only at specific certain times? Mornay, again, if I may hand over to you.
Yes, so the current ERO rules is applied to DebiCheck as well. So if you look at the different banks and basically how they process in ERO, that same rules will apply to DebiCheck. That includes the 6-day and 7-day processing banks. Obviously, if you look at certain banks being 7-day processing banks, they will apply the tracking over public holidays and Sundays, where the 6-day processing banks will only apply over the week, including Saturdays.
Okay, so obviously out of that, the answer is plain and simple. Yes, we do have banks that do full credit tracking on transactions, and we've got banks that do bank's best effort in terms of tracking. But the rules have not changed from ADO and NATO days. They are the same. Those same banks do the same application of that, and they will apply full credit tracking where it is required. And in those banks that only do the bank's best effort, there will be 2 attempts to debit against the accounts on a daily basis. What is the tracking cost difference after the 3 days free? So the difference is that it's increased by 30 cents. So the previous fee was R2, the new fee is R2.30. That is from day 4 going forwards for that you use. So obviously if you set 10 days but you only use 7, then 7 less the 3, which is free, leaves you with 4 times R2.30. That is the answer that you are looking for in that instance. How would the migrations require a re-authentication on the consumer side? No, it does not. Migrations is something that you would move out of the NATO ADO system into that platform. Just take note that when you migrate a transaction, they all do become 100% reversible, disputable. So the consumers can then dispute them, even your ADO transactions. They can go and dispute those transactions and reverse them. because it is not re-authenticated, and there's no option to re-authenticate it. Unfortunately, we don't have such an option to send it to the bank and say to them, we want to re-authenticate the transaction. They don't give us that option. There's no system built for that. Would be nice though. Would be very nice.
Maybe just to add.
Yes.
So although the transaction does become reversible, your ADO migrated transactions will be processed on the DebiCheck reversible rules, whereby your NADO will be processed on the normal reversible as per NADO rules.
Maybe just something for my own clarification, Mornay. So I spoke about the first early morning and the second early morning report or processing windows earlier on with RMS and so on. On your ADO transactions, are they processed with the first batch together with normal DebiCheck, or with the second batch of transactions that were processed through my RMS?
Yeah. So your ADO will be processed with the early morning, first window.
The first window.
And then the rest with the second.
Fantastic. So you are going to get a first bite at the cherry, so to speak, if I can put it that way. Then on the systems, not all the banks, like for example, Time Bank, are available on the drop-down menu. And I'd like to know if these banks will still be added so we can debit from them. So for a bank to be added to the system, they need to be a participant in the system. So if they go and register themselves to process DebiCheck transactions against other businesses, then they need to also supply the facility for you to debit against them. At this stage, I'm not aware that Time Bank specifically, Munay's also shaking his head, Time Bank have not indicated at all that they've got any requirement to participate in the DebiCheck stream. So for now, no is the answer. Are they going to do it in future? I don't know is the answer on that. We don't know what their plans are, unfortunately. The dates are also very confusing. I would, for example, choose 25th as a submit date when uploading transactions, but when I check the report, the action date will be month end 30th or 31st, meaning the system will only attempt to debit from the client's account on month end. So I think that's got to do with frequency selection during the upload stage. Brendan, do you maybe want to handle this one for us?
Sure, no problem, VH. So like Vaughan mentioned, your frequency is extremely important when loading a transaction. Now you can go and insert the debit date as the 25th, exactly like the example that was given to us. However, if you go and select end of month frequency, that transaction will process on end of month. So your frequency overrides your date that you insert on the terminal or on your TT1 platform. So your frequency that you select should be either monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, and make sure that your debit date is also correct. But remember, your frequency overrides your date, your debit order date.
100%. So you selected the 25th and you chose monthly as a frequency, then it would process on the 25th every single month. However, if you select the 25th with a frequency of end of month, that's where the problem comes in. Second last day of the month and those kinds of things. Your frequency overrides 100%. Thank you, Brendan.
So Vaughan, what we'll do is we're going to take all of these questions and we're going to get the account managers to also go back to the merchants and do physical training on some of these questions that have come through. Because especially this one, we will ask the account manager to visit and go and do some training on the frequency and the date selections.
Additional clarification. Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And yes, people, knowledge is power, you know, so we can never get enough training on this kind of thing. It is a new concept and we need to ask all of the questions again and again and again until we all understand it. I'm asking more than questions every single day repeatedly just to try and understand the system properly. So yes, very, very important. Brendan, I have another question here, which also for you. Do I have to use a terminal with NewPay Go? And if so, if not, what other options are there? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit about other features here as well.
So I actually forgot that point in my slide, and when you put your mouse over it, Vaughan, I remembered it. So you don't need a terminal. You really don't need a terminal using NewPay Go. You can use it to register a TT1 mandate. Again, you have to obviously load up or download the app from your app store, and then you have to be linked via our internal system to NewPay Go, and your account manager can help you with that. What we are going to do in future with the NewPay Go, and this is the part that I forgot when I was presenting, that in future you are going to be able to register a TT3 mandate via the NewPay Go app, which means that you will be able to the consumer will be able to put their PIN number on the NewPay Go app, and a TT3 transaction will be authenticated.
So in other words, on your phone, people, on your own phone, the consumer would be able to tap his card and put his PIN number in and process the transaction. So your phone becomes the terminal. That's effectively what Brendan's talking about. So yeah, exciting days, exciting times. There's still a bit of work to be done behind that thing in terms of certification, but we'll get there, and we'll get those solutions out to everyone. The next question is more clarity on TT1, RMS, manual loading, getting the NSRP, no response result back, and so forth. Morne, would you like to handle that thing? By the way, Morne, is it an NSRP or an NRSP?
It's an NRSP.
Okay, so our website has maybe got a spelling mistake there.
I will check it out. So yeah, quite a vague question, I think. So what basically it comes down to is that you do have different types in your TT1 transactions. So you have your real-time and delayed requests that you can do. We do, however, see within the TT1 real-time, again, you have two options. You can either supply it with a cell phone number or contact number, or without. We do, however, see in some cases you might have encountered this yourself as well, is whereby you get a response stating that the account is open and active, however, no contact details for this consumer. In this case, I will obviously recommend that you do a TT1 real-time with cell phone number, because obviously the bank or the consumer didn't apply the FICA rules and updated the contact details. But within that, we do see more responses or no responses basically being received on the TT1 real-time. Again, it's just based off educational on the consumer side. They might not be as educated on their phones as they need to be. And based off that, TT1 delayed is a more suitable transaction for those type of consumers, which obviously needs more time in responding to those SMSs or the USSD components.
Yeah, so I think another component, maybe just to add to that, the concept of it. So when you're sending out a transaction to a consumer through the system, so we take it, we will send it to our acquiring bank, it goes to BankServe, BankServe sends it on to that consumer's bank, whoever they bank with. They then send it off to the consumer. The consumer receives the response or the request on his or her phone to go and authenticate a transaction. It could be via USSD, it could be on ATM that they do the authentication, it could be on their banking app on the phone, it could be internet banking, whichever channel they choose to do the authentication. If they ignore that and there is no response sent back from the consumer and the transaction times out as per the timelines that Morten has put out for TT1 real-time, delayed, and so forth, then those transactions must come back to us with a no response result on it. So we did not receive a response from the consumer. Once that gets in with us, you can then go into your transaction maintenance tab and select all of those transactions with the NSR no response, NRSP. We've got it spelled wrong on the side, but with the no response status on it, you select them by tick box, just like you did normal transaction maintenance, doing the date changes and so on. You select multiple transactions. You can do bulk and batches of them as well, okay? A big batch of them at a time. And then you present those transactions to be pushed through to the bank to register the mandate for that transaction. So that is then an RMS transaction. It becomes an RMS transaction. So again, the account manager can most certainly give you some additional information on that, and we'll be able to guide you through these things. So please make contact with them, but we will also pass these things through to the team so that they can take action on it and get in contact with you. So can you change a contract number on DebiCheck? So a contract number in our sense is your file number. That's what I understand from this question. Right?
Yes.
So not the contract number that's been issued by the bank. This is what the merchant's own reference field is, the client number, if I can put it that way.
Correctly. So there is two fields related here. Are you referring to the client reference or the contract reference, one of the two? We did have a curveball, actually received a curveball on the client reference because there's currently nothing being mentioned in the PASA spec stating rules regarding the client ref, but we did, however, get clarity on that, and that rule is processed on the same rules on the contract ref. So basically what that rule says is that if you have not presented any collection request against that mandate, you are able to change the contract ref and client ref with only a notification to your consumer. However, if you have processed a collection on that mandate, then you will have to do a re-authentication or new mandate to get that authenticated and changed.
Okay, good. If you cancel one installment on a client's account, will the mandate become disputable? So no, it does not. A mandate for a customer is actually not registered in terms of installments at all. There are no installments lying at the bank. That's part of our job. It's part of our engine. We know when to actually present a transaction again and again, and when to stop presenting a transaction and to then cancel that stuff out of the system. So that is part of the work that we do. The actual mandate at the bank has 0 installments added. So if you cancel an installment, we will cancel it, and we will continue to maintain and keep the remainder of the entire contract live. So no, the contract does not become reversible or disputable. You do not need to fear about that. How will DebiCheck manage the date changes during December? We normally change the future dates to the 15th with tracking for that month, but now the maximum is 10 days, 100%. And that is, again, where it becomes very, very important to understand your consumer, your customers, to understand who their employers are. That is critically important to understand and maybe even build a relationship with those employers to find out when the pay dates will be during December. And if you've got those types of relationships in place, then you can get that, and then you can set those transactions effectively. Just note, other than ADO, where you can move a transaction earlier and then extend tracking, transaction was still non-reversible. In DebiCheck, you're moving the date. The second you move that date, transaction is reversible. So that is the challenge that you're going to be faced with there. Okay. Cancellation by system in DebiCheck is after 7 consecutive failed. Is it possible to cancel after 3 failed like ADO? So if you want to, so that's an automated systems cancellation. So it's 7 cycles actually. So 7 cycle rule. If you have not had successes in 7 cycles, so that could be weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever the frequency is. By the way, there's even an annual frequency, so it could be 7 years. But if the system has not received a success in 7 consecutive cycles, then you can go and cancel the contract as well after 3 if you wanted to. So if you wanted to do it earlier, then you can do that. But unfortunately, the system will not do it for you automatically after 3. No, we will do it after the 7, which is the rule of the system. I have a scenario where a customer is paid, but the DebiCheck does not run on the account. Why does that happen? So there could be a massive big host of reasons for that. We've had quite a few people over time say things like this for us, and then we go and check stuff, and then we see, but there was a date change that was done to a different date. There were small little things. So whatever those things are, we need to investigate it. So very important that you please get the information through to your account manager so we can properly go and analyze that, pull it apart and see exactly what is the underlying situation behind all of those instances and provide you with the evidence of what was done. So is there a way that once a payment has been confirmed that it can be integrated into WebFin? There's so much admin. So I'm going to make a deduction on what I understand from this. So what I'm understanding is that maybe a transaction was swiped manually, not through integrated solution, because obviously if you want it integrated, you could just set that up, right? And your account manager can talk to you to get that set up. But I'm suspecting that maybe you had I don't know, some challenge or something, and your terminal is not integrated. So for this reason, we have logged the requirement with the Delta development team to bring in a field which is referred to then as a mandate ID. So you've got a mandate ID, which is like the transaction ID that you had in ADA and NADA. And you would then, after the fact, be able to go onto your contract and add a mandate ID to that specific contract so that the reporting can automatically pull in. Unfortunately, I don't have a timeline on that specific development, but yes, it is something that is planned in the future. Folks, so we are sitting at the moment on 30 minutes over our allocated time of 1 hour. It doesn't really look like in fact, there's more people logged on now than at the start of the session. So we've had more people come in. So what's very clear to me is that there are lots of questions. And we understand that, and it's great that there are questions because that's the way that we're going to learn. And if you guys keep on asking the questions, then we can keep on building and developing and going to the next platform. So what we're going to do is, I'll maybe take 1 or 2 more quick questions, but I think then we'll close off and we'll take all of your questions that have been posted, and we'll contact everyone through the account managers. We do have your names on the system here as well, so thank you for that. So we'll contact you and we'll handle a lot of things with you, a lot of these things with you one-on-one. So Morne, if I can look at this one and throw it over to you. Why can't we recall the tracking if the client has cancelled the contract with us? So the recall function that we had in the ADA transaction.
Okay, so there is actually 2 scenarios that we need to look at here. So although the recall function does exist, however, before we do send it up, which is normally processed in batch format, so it's basically files that we send. So once we do get that request to recall, cancel that collection or mandate, basically what we do is we need to send it up to the bank and wait for their responses. I think in one of the previous slides mentioned that we do get some delays on it. So in most cases, we do get a response within the next day. However, it can take up to 5 days. And within that period, it might be that the tracking has actually expired already, and or we have received a success failed response from the bank on that collection. So it's quite difficult to assess those, but we are looking at improved measures with our current bank to get more streamlined measures in place to obviously assist you in getting those responses faster and quicker.
Thank you. So another question here, which is a good one, and to understand also the rules of the system and how the system actually works. If a debit order is loaded for a Friday, why does it show in tracking on a Thursday already? So there are certain extraction windows that we have to comply with when we extract transactions and send it up to the bank for processing. So when we're extracting the transactions, we will do so the day before the collection needs to take place against the customer's account, right? I mean, you can't send it on the morning only. We need to tell the bank the previous day. This mandate that's there, remember I spoke earlier about we will control the installments and manage who gets cancelled and what gets cancelled, what gets present. This is all part of that. That's how the system works. You have to do it that way. So the management engine will then extract the transactions on a Thursday, send it up to the bank, and that is after 3, right, Morne?
Yes.
So 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the prior day to collection, we extract all of the transactions, we take those transactions, bundle them, we send them up to the bank and we say, here are your transactions for tomorrow. So I have asked the guys to actually change that tracking status, because it's actually confusing, right? It shouldn't say in tracking, because you're not being billed for the tracking yet. The tracking will only start the next day if it goes into a tracking cycle. We don't want to create an incorrect perception. So I have asked the guys to please change that to a status which says extracted. So once it says extra, so you will see those transactions move to an extracted status, which then just means that they've been extracted and sent up to the bank. The next question on DebiCheck via the API web services on successful transactions. Can we search on the response date and time, the date created field? Let's handle that one. There's two questions here, but can we do that first of all? Can we search by the date created date field?
So we did make some changes to our web service lately. So prior to the change, the web service actually reported on the submit date. However, this was incorrect, because obviously if you're looking for success, you're looking for that response on that success. So we changed it to the response date. So whenever you enter your filters on, for instance, the 25th, everything successful within that date range will obviously be returned onto the web services. We did, however, that response date, we did actually name it created date, because that is when we created the response within our reports. So currently you can't search by, but obviously you can apply your filters to get only a certain date or date range back from the web services.
100%. So Morna also heads up our integrations team. What I'm going to ask him is maybe just, that's a very specific integrated question, and maybe not quite suited to the entire forum here. So maybe Morna, you can just connect with them after. We'll make the names and everything available, and then you guys can just talk around that as well. Next question is, what is the DebiCheck daily cutoff time? So I'm assuming this is for creating transactions into the system. The create date or create time is technically before 3 o'clock today for the next day. However, at NewPay, we've chosen to not do that. And the reason is, folks, you know, we get so many people that wait for the very, very last minute before they send stuff through to us. And then they are very mad at us if we get a file of 50,000 transactions in a TT2 bulk file to present for the next day at 1:23, and we present it and we get only 20,000 out of 50,000 to actually be presented to the bank in time. So we've extended that timeline. It's 2 days in our system. You need 2 days prior to date. So it's the same as ADO and NADO. We work on those dates. You have to present it 2 days prior to the action date. It's also because there's that 3 o'clock cut off for extracting the requests for processing against the consumer's accounts. We have to cut off and we have to send off our collection requests, where we are requesting the bank to collect against transactions by 3 p.m. every single day. If we don't do that, then we will be missing some serious deadlines. And we actually start doing that in the morning early, from about 10 o'clock, because most people upload their transactions throughout the months prior to that, right? So we've got the warehouse of data, and then we've got the small little bits that comes in after the fact. And it's amazing, but there are still volumes. There are still volumes coming in for a day or two from now to debit against customers' accounts. It's astonishing to me sometimes, but yes, there are. Then in the past, we had consultants like Dave and Nadeem that came out to branches and was available for branch questions. Is this still the case? So absolutely yes, in terms of the generic question, yes, 100%, that's still the case. Nadeem is still definitely available. Dave, unfortunately for us and for a lot of customers, is not available. Dave has gone on to retirement. He has managed to work out his last years with NewPay, and he went into retirement this year in April. We will miss his wisdom and his insight and his very dry sense of humor. But Dave's still around. But yes, so we certainly do still have consultants available. we do have a different approach with COVID and everything that's going on, and I'm sure you know all of us have been impacted by this thing. All of you can I think all of us initially said, yeah, I've heard of someone that's had COVID, and then that story changed to, yes, I know someone that has COVID or has had COVID, and that changed to, I've heard of someone that unfortunately passed, that has had COVID, and that soon became, I've got someone close to me that has passed, that had COVID, and I think at the moment we're at the stage where we say I've got multiple people that were close to me that I know that has passed because of COVID or on the back of COVID. In fact, I heard of a customer, very, very close customer, good customer of ours this morning. I'm not going to go to that. But yes, our present thoughts are with that family and all of the colleagues there as well. And also with every single other customer that we've had that has had losses. So folks, we are very, very careful around this thing. We are trying to protect you as well as our own staff. In the process, you will see that when we do come out to sites, we are vigilant on maintaining distances. We would request you to please extend distances between us. We would request you to not have 10 million people sitting all together around the table with us in the middle and everyone all around us like this, watching a screen, getting training, and we would prefer to go into a train the trainer one-on-one type of a situation. But yes, we still do come out to sites, we still meet up with people. We also have the alternative option of doing meetings via Teams, Microsoft Teams. Everyone has access to that because all of our platforms runs on Microsoft. So if you've got Microsoft Windows, then you've got access to Teams. And it's a brilliant system that really, really works well. We've actually seen that we are able to cover more people because you don't have traveling time between people. You don't have to go and look for parking. You don't have to fight with a cop who's trying to give you a traffic fine because you parked somewhere you shouldn't, because you just quickly want to run into the shop to go and help them. So, but yes, we are certainly still seeing customers. We are still going out, and if that's your requirement, then you do that. I still do that myself as well. I also go out. All of us still do go out to customers, and we do certainly engage. Then what happens once the terminal has no use? Can it be returned since it has no, it is invoiced on a monthly basis? So obviously, if you're only using TT1 transactions or TT2 transactions, then certainly yes, that is the case. You can return the terminal. Then you just have your monthly platform fee, which is applicable on the system. If you are referring to doing TT3 on the phone with a tap on the glass with a pin, we're not quite there yet. So please just hang on a little bit. We'll get there, and we'll get that solution out to you guys, so that we can actually do all of that. Do you have any developments for electronic mandates for the mobile device? So I think that boils down to what I was just speaking about. You know, when we do pin on glass, we're going to do mobile items on here. But also, if you go and look at the NewPay Go application, on that you can certainly process your TT1 transactions through to the system. Yes, 100%. But you're welcome to call me. I know you've got my cell phone number, so you are welcome to call me, and we can discuss that at length as well, and just go into all of the different options of how we can exactly help you in all of those things. What is the major reason for bulk receipting via Delphin? So, yeah, Morne, can I hand that over to you? Is that okay?
Yes, sure. So the main reason is just to simplify your life. It's basically to allow you to, by a click of a button, receive all your transactions done via integration to the correct people and to the correct ledger accounts. Like I said, just to simplify your life.
Yeah, it definitely it's actually faster to do it that way. I didn't read the second part of the question, Morne, because of my statement that I just made. But so the second part is, as the reporting on NUPE website is more accurate or on time, thus payments are sometimes done manually. So I understand that. And it's because we are getting these multiple windows of reporting coming in from the banks at the moment. And that's why you're getting this disconnect, and where the things are not always showing in real time on the Delphin systems, for instance. However, I promise you, if you're sitting with 200, 300, in some cases 5,000 customers on one branch where you need to do reporting on, and you can do a bulk import into a Delphin system, that most certainly does work a lot faster and is more effective. Guys, so I'm going to wrap up with that and close off the session, if that's all good. Anything else?
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just one comment here quickly from Nicole. Nicole, thank you very much for your comment. A very big thank you to the NUPE team, especially Stefan, for carrying all your service providers through this very difficult period. Without your guidance and support, we wouldn't be able to get through this period. Thank you, Nicole, for your comment.
Yeah, bless you, Nicole. You know, it's really so awesome to have customers that we have started calling family. And that's why it's hard for us to lose customers as well. It's very sad. But yes, bless you and thank you for that. And all of you, please be safe, stay safe. And we look forward to engaging with you in the future again. Thank you.